Core to the issue of monitoring the post-elections, as we've been doing on a worldwide global trend, is looking at what's going to happen with Israel. Israel had signaled to the Barack Obama campaign that they would hold off on Iran until they began to understand what his policy was going to be as far as the Middle East. Now, we'll see how long that one plays out. Obviously, recently, there was an incursion of the U.S. into Syria, made a raid across there, and many things were going in Syria I would like to talk about. Shoshana Bryen is joining me right now from JINSA, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. I'm trying to put together in my own head, Shoshana, what the geopolitics of world security is going to be as a result of the change here. And you had an interesting theory of, the euphoria in the European press now. Suddenly it's a chic to be an American again. And so what are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts are all Europeans are not the same, but Western Europe has for many years used the vehicle of George W. Bush to blame him for things that he did that they wanted him to do anyway. The war in Iraq, it was clear to the Europeans that Saddam could not go on the way he was. We took care of it, they blamed us. The incursion into Syria, we took care of things, they blamed us. It's a nice habit. He does the things that they want done, and they get to call him a cowboy. Now, however, they're going to be faced with a president who thinks more like they do. And they're either going to have to say, look, President Obama, we really do worry about Iran. Would you help us worry about Iran? Or they're going to have to decide that Iran's really not that important anyway. I think they'll decide that Iran is important. I think you'll suddenly find the French and the Germans and the British and the Italians more conservative than we are and pushing the president, the new president, in a more conservative direction. Of
course, they'll say it at that time, we'll see the Europeans can work with President Obama now. That will be the political claim out there. Those are all what I call FPC, for public consumption statements.
Yes, they are for public consumption statements, but what the Europeans have been using for public consumption statements or anti-American statements, they're going to have to stop.
Well, they won't have anybody to shoot at, so to speak.
That's true. They won't have anyone to shoot at, but then they have to decide what really threatens them. They can't say to us, get out of Iraq and get out of Afghanistan and don't go into Pakistan if they really think that those things are parts of their security. So far, they've been able to say to President Bush, we're really unhappy with you. You really are a cowboy. You really shouldn't do that. Behind closed doors, they go, boy, it's a good thing George Bush is looking after our interests. Now they're going to have to figure out what end is really up. It will be complicated for them.
I think so, because also look at the situation they're now facing with Russia's move. Russia knows it has a window here to do some maneuvering. They knew that, as a matter of fact, when they moved on Georgia.
Yeah.
And the Europeans look at the situation with NATO. Once again, they're trying to play this shuffle back and forth, one foot in each camp. So things have radically changed here.
Well, with Russia, they had both feet in the appeasement camp. Europe gets 25% of its natural gas from Russia.
Yeah.
Winter is coming. It's going to be cold in Europe. They are not interested in taking on the Russians. However, they were very happy to have President Bush defend Georgia, at least rhetorically. None of us defended Georgia physically, but at least the president defended the Georgians rhetorically. Yeah. Europeans are totally in an appeasement mode as it comes to the Russians right now.
The Asia Times was saying something very interesting, that the U.S. may well stop trying to be the world's policeman, but ironically, they said they may not like it when they do.
That's true. I think there are people who expect us to be the policeman, and if President Obama chooses not to be, they will be sorry. It's interesting that came from the Asian Times. Asians, by and large, prefer Republican American presidents because they find Republicans more Asia-centered. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if it's real or not, but generally, the impression in Asia is that Republican presidents are more Asia-centric and Democratic presidents are more Europe-centric. So I think it's not surprising. It is interesting that you found that in an Asian newspaper.
When the Asia Times, when some of their liberal columnists write things that I might not necessarily totally agree with, I find some of their insights to be actually decent.
Yes.
A lot of the rhetoric I read in the European newspapers is just that, rhetoric. What I see coming out of some of the Asian commentaries are actually sober reflections. There's a difference.
It's true. The Asians are actually much better at analysis. And the Asians do not have a knee-jerk anti-American reaction, whereas some of the Western, not all of them, but some of the Western Europeans do. If we do it, they don't like it. The Asians really do not have any of that.
What else should we look at in the global situation? We have the subject of Syria. Let's zip over to that. We obviously made an incursion into Syria a few weeks back, and again, just like the Israeli strike earlier, everybody's scratching their head going, now, why did we do that?
Syrians are experiencing great discomfort. Bashar Assad is not his father. Recently in Syria, and I would say that's in the last 9 or 10 months, you have in Syria disquieting things. There was a prison riot where more than 100 people were killed. There was some rioting in the Kurdish areas of Syria. There have been assassinations, including a very, very high-level Syrian military officers who were very close to Bashar Assad. And then you had Israel taking care of an incident in northern Syria that was probably a nuclear reactor, probably a North Korean reactor. And now you have the United States. What the United States did was mount a special forces mission to knock off the al-Qaeda cell that was allowing al-Qaeda to move from Syria into Iraq, across a part of the Iraqi border that hasn't been properly controlled yet. It was a very successful move. We took care of the guys we needed to take care of. The Syrians have moved their forces away from the border. They will not be permitting al-Qaeda to cross that border anytime in the near future. But it goes to show you that the Syrians internally have some problems. By the way, there was a second incursion into Syria, and it wasn't military. Robert Malley, who was for some time a member of the Obama campaign staff, was let go in May after he had some meetings with Hamas, and Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by our government. After it was found out that Robert Malley was talking to Hamas, he left the campaign. However, in the middle of October, he went to Syria. The question is, at whose behest did he go? If it's true that the Obama campaign sent him, if they're trying to rehabilitate Robert Malley and send him to Syria to pass messages to the Syrians, that could be problematic. First of all, because it's private diplomacy, which is illegal in this country. But more importantly, it was sending mixed messages to the Syrians. At the same moment that we were trying to impress upon them the importance of keeping that border tight for the safety of American troops in Iraq, Robert Malley was over there trying to figure out how to be nice to them. And it remains to be seen what kind of role Malley plays for President-elect Obama.
I've always said that there's always going to be a bully on the playground. And some bullies you can't negotiate with. That's all there is to it. That would seem to be more of a problematical issue given the way that we're going.
I think both of those things are true. Yes, we'll always have bullies, and yes, we'll at some point have to deal with them. And I think that's regardless of who the president is. One of the things that even Americans, I dumped this on the Europeans, but Americans also have become comfortable with is the mistaken idea that a lot of the world is unhappy with us only because President Bush was our president. A lot of these people were unhappy with us before, and they remain unhappy with us. And I mean specifically Islamic radicals who really are intent upon controlling large parts of the world and having Sharia law and their own system of justice and education spread as far as they can. We are an impediment to that. We under President Obama, we under President Bush, we under President Clinton, all of this stuff has been going on for years. And simply the fact that we've changed presidents doesn't mean that they will now decide they like us. They don't like us because they don't like our system. They don't like who we are. They want to be ascendant. So I think what you will find is that President Obama's administration will have to respond to these people. And that probably means at some point telling them exactly where to get off.
Let us pause in our musings here right now. Shoshana Bryen is here with me from JINSA, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. Their website is JINSA, JINSA.org. We shall return. We're at steelonsteel.com, and the program with John Loeffler is Steel on Steel. I don't know. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. What do you think? Okay. Anyway, welcome back into the program. John Loeffler here with you. Our website is steelonsteel.com. This program is available to you also on tapes and CDs. If you'd like the full subscription, meaning you get a copy of the program every week delivered to your front door, that is $20 plus handling, or the best program of every month. We picked what we think was the best program of the month, and we deliver it to your front door on tape or CD. That's $5 plus handling. If you would like to find out how these subscriptions work, we're at 1-800-829-5646. We're some friendly person there. We'll talk to you. 1-800-829-5646. 1-800-TAX-JOHN if you're driving around. And if you prepay for any of our subscriptions for 6 months, you get a month for free. You actually only pay for 5. 1-800-829-5646. Shoshana Bryen's with me from the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. We're looking at how the world geopolitics are probably changing due to the U.S. elections. It's now chic in Europe to be American again. It wasn't for 8 years, you know. People were vindictive and vituperative as a number of European governments allowed the U.S. to do their dirty work for them in a number of different areas, while at the same time protesting those actions. Shoshana Bryen's here. Shoshana, you think, we talked about bullies on the playground. What about when you go into a situation where there's guys, and the guys are going to push you to see what you're made of? I mean, Obama knows about this from the basketball court. Is that going to happen on the global scene?
I think they will. I think Vice President-elect Biden made that clear. On the other hand, he got a bad rap for that. Any new president would be tested by the bad guy. They want to see what you're made of. And by the way, there are a lot of Americans who would like to know the same thing. We have elected a president who has basically no experience in foreign policy, no experience abroad, no specific experience dealing with the kinds of people who are our Islamic enemies. He has a lot of experience in the Islamic world. I mean, he made something of the fact that he's lived in the Islamic world, and that's fine. But the people that threaten us are not the people he grew up with. The people that threaten us are people who really really mean to kill us. And that may be different than the experience he's had with them in the past.
Yeah, it's also not politically correct to say that. It's less so in Great Britain. And that's one of the issues of political correctness nowadays. It actually prevents you from saying what you're thinking.
Yes, that's true. And I just did. I said what I was thinking, so I hope nobody's angry with me. But here's the problem. Muslims in general are not a problem for us. Muslims are not what we're worried about. But there are, within the Muslim community, there are people we had better worry about. They are willing to kill themselves. They're willing to kill other Muslims. And they certainly are willing to kill us.
Yeah, and it's not just because of necessarily something we've done, even though, I mean, you must admit, we do meddle quite a bit in other countries. That is a factor. It's a factor, yeah.
We do meddle, and for everybody who likes the meddling, and there are lots of people who like the meddling, don't forget that, there are an equal number of people who don't think we ought to. And that's, by the way, something that President Obama seriously will have to deal with. We're watching Pakistan right now, and you didn't mention it yet, but I know you're going to. Pakistan is a very, very troubled country. There are some people who say if we don't do more with and for Pakistan, you're going to have an Islamic government with a nuclear weapon. There are other people who say the reason Pakistan has a problem is because we're there and we need to back off of Pakistan. Both of those positions, diametrically opposed, both of them have some legitimacy. President Obama is going to have to choose one. We are either going to have to get more involved in Pakistan to try to stabilize it, or we're going to choose to leave it and see if it can stabilize itself because the Americans are gone, because then nobody can pick on us. He'll have to pick one or the other.
Yeah, and we're also finding now that the Taliban are using it more and more, and slop over from Afghanistan and related issues. Now, the weaker that the government gets there, the more that will be inclined to happen.
Yes.
And you're right, unlike Iran, which is working hard to do something in the area of nuclear, they already have done it.
They have done it, and they have not shared it directly, and they have not used it, although they've tested it publicly. But you would not want to see a Taliban-like government having its hands on nuclear weapons. Not in Iran and not in Pakistan.
I've tried to visualize a suicide bomber using that kind of a weapon, which is one of those perverted thoughts that comes into your head.
Yeah, strapping himself to the bottom of a B-52 bomber and falling down with the bomb.
Like in Dr. Strangelove, recall that one.
It could, but more likely what you'll have is a suicide bomber or something similar with radioactive material who will send it someplace or bring it someplace and do damage of that sort.
You mean like a dirty bomb type thing?
Like a dirty bomb.
How do you think the thing with Iran will ultimately head? It's temporarily somewhat on hold, but Iran has its own internal issues, let's face that, especially, by the way, with the fall of oil prices. These countries that launched off to do big and great things like Venezuela and Russia and Iran are suddenly finding themselves in a not-so-good spot here.
They're in a terrible spot, which is nice for us. I have to say, and you won't hear me say this very often, I give points to the Saudis because there was an OPEC meeting last week where Iran and Venezuela tried to get OPEC to cut production precisely because they need the money. And the Saudis held the line. The Saudis said they were not going to cut back production. The falling oil prices don't bother them for the moment, and they're just fine with it. And since the Saudis are the world's primary producers, it makes a big difference to us. So I don't often give kudos to the Saudis, but I will this time.
The Saudis have an interest in this. They understand that this could spiral out of their control.
They do. They also really despise the Iranians and the Venezuelans, so it was okay for them. But the impact of it was that American consumers will have much cheaper gasoline. The downside for American consumers is that if we forget that all of this fossil fuel is still finite, we'll stop doing alternatives, and that would be not so good for us. We should keep doing the alternatives anyway.
Yes.
But you were asking about Iran's nuclear program and how to deal with it. Remember first that Iran's nuclear program is more than 30 years old. It was started by the Shah. It was inherited by the mullahs, by the Ayatollah Khomeini, and all successive mullahs. So it is part of Iran's national policy, not just its religious policy, but it was started by the Shah. They're not going to give it up. There's nothing we can offer them by way of a grand bargain that will make them give it up, because they really believe that as Persians, and I don't even mean this as religious people, but as Persians, that they are a great power and they are entitled to nuclear capability. So anyone who thinks that you can offer them something, I think is mistaken. What you probably still can do, because they are having technological problems with it and real nuclear weapons capability is some way off, is try to get the countries that are still financing this stuff to stop doing it. We talk to the British, the French, the Germans, and the Russians. But that's all we do. We talk to them. We go to the UN and we look for more sanctions. I would take a more direct route, and I hope President Obama will take a more direct route. When we wanted to keep the Russians from getting technology that we didn't want them to have in the Cold War, we said that if a company sold something to the Russians, they could not sell to the United States. So all kinds of defense companies and technology companies and computer companies and whatever had to make a choice between doing business in the West and doing business with Russia. If we did the same thing to the Germans, who are financing Iranian energy development, or the French, who are providing the technology for Iranian energy development, or the Russians, who are providing technology and support and personnel, tell them they can't trade with us. The companies that do business in Iran can't do business with us. I guarantee you those companies would stop doing it. And if they stop doing it, the Iranian thing will collapse. But nobody so far has been willing to make this painful. Going to the UN and asking for new sanctions is painless. You need to go after the specific companies that do specific business in Iran, and you need to stop them.
You know, that you can see, and we're on a clock here right now because we have an energy storm mounting over the next 4 years, which is, I call it a bottleneck. You know, you were talking about alternatives. Alternatives are wonderful. I'm a big fan of alternatives, but they are 5 to 15 years out before they're on a commercial scale.
Yeah.
Oil is going to be the energy for transportation for quite some time to come.
One thing we could do, by the way, to speed up your timeline is make energy policy national security policy, partly because the primary objective of the U.S. military in the Middle East, until the Iraq War, Iraq now has changed it, has been to defend the oil fields and the sea lanes by which oil is sent around the world to its users. That's what the U.S. does in the Middle East. That's military policy. I'm not sure why we do that. We should say to ourselves that it's in our national security interest to stop doing that, and therefore the development of alternatives will be national security policy, not just feel-good green policy. I guarantee you could speed up your timeline from 5 to 15 years, 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, you actually could do that. The problem that you have is you have a public consciousness of it, which is not there yet. And I was thinking about that when I was watching the crowd at Obama's speech in Chicago right after his McCain conceded. And I thought, you know, these people really don't understand what the core issues of the country are right now. The people are feeling pain, but they're feeling pain not because of things necessarily because of healthcare, even though that's an issue. They're feeling things because of more fundamental things that are wrong underneath, one of which is what you just talked about, our security policy and its relationship to energy. And look, even our energy infrastructure in this country is falling apart. If the Gulf of Mexico turned into oil tomorrow, we couldn't do anything with it.
That's right.
Our refineries are running flat out. Every time we have a hurricane or some major interruption, look what happened in the Southeast here recently. Suddenly it's a shortage, and that's what people don't understand. We're headed towards serious shortages.
Yes, I have nothing to add to that. You're exactly right. You put your finger on it.
I was waiting for your brilliant mind to come back.
No, your brilliant mind got ahead of me.
And that storm, I'm calling it a crud storm of rather intense proportions here. You know, we're not out of this economic recession. We're not going to be out of it for a while.
No, but the only good thing about the economic recession, not that there are a whole lot of good things about it, is that it does by itself reduce the demand for oil and drop the price. And it's a spiral going up and it's a spiral going down. And the shortcomings that were produced by it going up are going to be reversed coming down. People will have more money in their pockets. People, by the time they get to Christmas shopping, after Thanksgiving, will start feeling a little bit better because gas is, $2.35 instead of $4.35.
Right.
It's a big difference to people.
Yep.
But that's a very short-term fix.
Very short-term.
Very short-term. We don't do something about not only the refining capability, but also nuclear energy and clean coal and all of the other things.
Yep.
We are in deep trouble for the foreseeable future.
It's interesting that you recognize that. I'm calling it the Great Obama Economic Recovery. You know, there'll be a period of euphoria in here in which it will seem like things are going much better. They've been fixed. And I said, no, the fundamentals for $300 a barrel oil are still in place. They have not changed.
That's right.
This is simply a temporary roll down for maybe, 12 months or something like that?
Or less, depending on what happens. For example, if the oil price gets low enough, Hugo Chavez may decide that we need a war to raise the prices.
Right.
And he may foment one in South America.
Yep.
There are a lot of countries that depend on Venezuelan oil. We are actually the only people who pay full price for Venezuelan oil. The rest of it is subsidized around South America to help him with his standing with the people down there. If he can't afford to do that anymore, he may just stop doing it. The Iranians may decide to take out an Iraqi refinery. That'll raise the price of oil even before 12 months. So slow down in economic productivity and then rise in economic productivity. About 12 months from now, the oil price should start to rise substantially, but there are lots of things that can shorten up the timeline.
Any closing thoughts, Shoshana? I think we didn't cover that you think is important.
Don't use any more energy than you need to. And I really think we have a period of great uncertainty here because the president that we have elected has no track record on international politics and security policy. If you make a mistake in health care, it's probably survivable. If you make a mistake in security policy, unfortunately, the likelihood is that people will die. So we had better hope that he has a really fast learning curve and really good advice.
Your website?
My website is www.jinsa.org.
Maybe as time goes by, we'll have you back and we'll review what we said here and see whether we've been right or wrong.
No, you're going to hold up my words to me and see how I hold up?
Well, look at it this way. I'm actually going to hold up my own words here. I'm doing a post-mortem on the elections and where I think things will be in 12 months, 24 months. So I'm going to hold myself accountable to it. We'll go back and play those and say, well, here's what we said.
If you invite me back, I'll come back and listen to my words too, and I'll eat whichever of them are necessary.